Well, for more on this, we can speak to Candace Laing, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for your time here on BBC News. We heard from some people in Ontario there in Nomia's report and their concerns. You've described these incoming tariffs as profoundly disturbing. Can you tell me what you're most concerned about?
Absolutely. So I think for months leading up to yesterday, the business community was incredibly concerned with what we might be facing. And as of yesterday, absolutely all Canadians are feeling just, I think, bewilderment. Why people are asking, why is this happening? It makes no sense to digest the fact that your biggest ally and trading partner is forcing Canada into a recession. And so in terms of figuring out what are we facing, at first, there was concessions demanded and, working hard on those important issues, border issues. And we cautioned early on, we think we're in a position here, Canada could do everything possible, yet what's good enough to make sure we're safe from the threat of tariffs. And as we listen more closely, I think President Trump has revealed what the end game of tariffs themselves actually are. And he has talked about President McKinley and policy of 1890, where really federal revenues were filled by the imposition of tariffs. And in today's context, that those come in very handy, those revenues, to cover off other tax breaks that have been promised. And unfortunately, those costs, as we heard from his own post this morning, don't actually fall just on the shoulders of Canadians, everyday Canadians and Canadian businesses in our economy. They hit Americans and the American economy as well.
What's your perspective on the countermeasures? Could they work? Could that be effective?
Well, I think Canadians feel it's very important to take a stand, to stand up for ourselves. There's support for a response. I think from our perspective, whether that's a dollar for dollar, that's very difficult when you are a smaller economy. So, we are more...
Apologies, I'm just going to interrupt you there, Candace. We're just going to take you because Marco Rubio is speaking in panel. Let's go back now, if we can, to Candace Laing, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Candace, apologies for the interruptions there, but we were talking about the tariffs, and I was asking you about your perspective on those countermeasures and if they could be effective.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just to pick up where we left off, I think Canada is being very thoughtful about our response, and at the end of the day, an escalated trade war. We feel we're already in a trade war, but that is just so damaging to citizens on both sides of the border. The costs of these are really on the shoulders of consumers, of the farmers. If it was only American-U.S. tariffs, we know that hits the American real household income, $1,300 for every family. So we would definitely try to avoid that escalation while we're taking a stand and hoping to find a way through this. And it's very disappointing because what was formally penned on Inauguration Day was a commitment to a process to review the trade agreement by April 1st. And so this really jumps out in front of that. And then from Canada's perspective, and I think we just heard they filed against this, but we have a trade agreement, the USMCA, which is scheduled for renewal next year, and we anticipated discussions to start on that this year.
You mentioned the word recession when we were speaking a little earlier, and in your position as the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce there, what are businesses saying to you about how impactful this could be?
It's incredibly impactful. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, our business data lab, we have modeled the full impact of a 25% reciprocated tariff scenario. And, that really has us facing a recession, perhaps even as early as mid-year. We know it will impact our GDP by 2.6%. It also impacts the GDP of the United States by $467 billion, or 1.6% of their GDP, which is why I think it's so frustrating that this is so mutually destructive, that we actually find ourselves in this position today, which is unraveling, decades of a trade partnership and relationship that has really resulted in integrated, efficient supply chains. And in fact, that integration of the supply chains, we'll see how the next few days play out. But we have, if you look at the exports of Canada to the US, President Trump might speak of them in terms of finished products, but 70% of what Canada sends to the US are inputs, which actually support manufacturing and support 1.4 million jobs in the US. So we'll see how long they can endure the pain or sacrifice that he asked of them in his post this morning.
Candace Laing, thank you very much for your time here on BBC News.